Here I'm going to run through some bass lines for trance music. I'm going to keep them very simple. First one is the typical offbeat bass line. Then a variation for that would be a racier sounding one. Now here I'm missing the first beat of each bar, so the frequencies don't clash. It gives you a nice clear sound and the bass line's hammering away. To give it a bit more feel, you can experiment with accenting the middle notes or different notes, or in triplet fills, and then set your VST to respond to velocity, and I've set it here to increase the cutoff with velocity. But you can tie any parameters to that and experiment. What I tend to do is avoid putting bass lines on top of bass drums. It suits some form of music, but with trance it seems a lot nicer to actually stay away where you can from the bass line, unless it's a sort of dubby feel or a slower bass line and a breakdown. For sort of triplet fills, I'd literally just throw some notes in and then just space them out, in a triplet pattern. And I'm saying triplet, I'm using 16th notes, so from my first note I then have 1, 2, third note, 1, 2, third note, 1, 2, third note. And then I'd start playing around, and I'll actually just start mucking around as I would, just to create a bass line. Right, so you get a basic bass line going, then I wouldn't start progressing that. I'd then move on to another instrument to bring some sort of melody to the sound. Now here I've got like a little stab sound, which I'll unmute so we can actually hear it. Right, so how I would work is I'd take this melody and then I'd double the length of it. So I'd start, I've got two bars worth, or a bar worth there, and I'd copy it across, and then I'd start mucking around like this. And in what I'm thinking at this moment is, okay, this pattern works for a while and then needs to progress, so I don't want to progress it immediately. I then just think, right, okay, I want to run that line as it is for a little bit. Let's put it in the right place. then I'd run this pattern. The bass line is still left as it is, okay? And I just let this loop run and then start to feel where it needs to change, and then just start putting some changes in. Right, so I like that, and what I would do next is go back to the bass line. Now I know this is 4 bars long at the moment, so I'm going to want the bass line to start off with just to do half of that. So I just want to work on getting a change to happen nicely. That's a nice one, so I'll remember that one. That one sort of works. Right, just to get a quick idea, rather than letting something loop for a long time, I'm just working in shorter spaces just to get an idea of what I want to do, and then I'm going to make it happen. Right, so that's a nice one. Where was it? Let's have a listen. Yeah, but that's dying to creep up there. Sometimes you might have to fiddle around to get everything playing how you want, but just keep moving notes up and down till things fit. It's nearly there. Right, so that'll do. Now I'm going to go back to my melody, and I'll probably start to expand on this now and think, right, needs a bit more than that. So let's have a little think. That works, so I'll just copy that around. I'll explain a bit about the scale that's being used in a moment. Right, so that's working to a degree, that's all fine. And what the scale that I'm using here is basically, I haven't a clue. The way that I worked it out is basically from the bass line is I'd pick notes that work well to my ears, and sometimes, let's save this off, I'm going to create a new spawn track to show you what's being done here. Right, I'm going to delete all that. 2 bars. Take the bass line back down as well. Make the bass line just completely boring now. Right. One thing with the melodies, and a way of getting a feel for the notes that you want to use, or a scale or a feel, is what they call question and answer. Is that every time you write a melody, is you want a logical answer to your initial melody. Now, what I mean by that is you have to try and imagine that your melody is speaking. So this is our initial melody. It's just going but. So if we want it to be give it a happy answer back, is copying those across, and then I'd start playing around to see what sort of different feels. Now, I might not know what scale I'm writing at the moment. I would just go with the flow and see what happens. Right, that is a very simple question and answer. So let's answer back in a different way and set the whole tone for the track. So I'm going to answer this way. Now, I know from a bit of my theory that this is going to sound a bit more exotic. And that sets the whole tone for how your melody would progress, how your bass line might progress, and things like that. And you know, you can keep mucking around until you find something that really works for you. So you can hear many different feels coming out from there, and that's the question and answer. If you can get a handle on that and how to grow your melodies, you can make some huge passages really intricate for the listener, or very emotive, and it takes a while to get control of, but very rewarding. So that would be a way to make sort of the killer like lead line melodies that you could hear out there. Now, to make these really work, it's going to be bouncing off what pitch the bass line is playing at, and to find the changes which are very strong, you can do it by trial and error. You don't need to know any scales or anything. You just move the bass line notes around till they work with your melody. But remember, if your melody is too complex or the lead line is too long to start with, the bass line is going to be difficult to work with. So you keep things simple at the start, and just work it from there. So like, I'll just mess around with the bass line here. So by messing around there, I could sort of see that I could make fairly progressive bass line very quickly. And I'd repeat the process which I showed earlier. I'd get the bass line progressing, or the melody progressing,